So with that, I have one person signed up. I'll invite you up first, Roland Bennett.
Hey, my name is Roland. I'm here because I want to invite all of the council folk and anyone to come see an art exhibit that myself and a few other mine students just completed last night around 11 p.m. That we're displaying on Maple Plaza. The exhibit is called Engineering Genocide. It is a 10-foot tall and 16-foot wide model of the very real apartheid wall that exists in Palestine with a mural on it. And I will say I'm pretty proud of how the mural came out. There were even people that were like, I disagree with what you're saying, but that is incredible art. Our goal with this is to foster conversation on the real world impacts of our work as scientists and engineers, mostly with regard to the arms industry. I can tell you that for the past 16 months, I've experienced more pain than ever before in my entire life. And I can also tell you that I've felt more hope than ever before. Because right now, people are interested in learning about us, about Palestine, more than ever before, at least during my lifetime. And so, kind of as I said, today, all I'm here to do is to invite you and ask you to be interested in learning. You can come see our mural. Also, who likes books? Y'all. I have a number of books here. One is written by a Palestinian American professor, and one is written by an Israeli professor. So, yeah, that's all. Who wants some books? One is longer. This one is longer. It's much more thorough. It's much more of like a history textbook. It's much more rigorous. Like, I have a friend who teaches this class out of this textbook. She's a professor at CU. This one's not as rigorous, but it's a lot shorter. So do you want the rigor or the short?
You could just leave them.
I'll take rigor.
Yeah. Rashid Halloween, he's the president of Columbia.
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Asa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future with a more sophisticated approach.
So without further ado, Roland, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Hey, my pleasure.
good to talk to you.
You know, my show, the channel I built around this idea of three things that intersect, our freedom, our liberty as the first thing, and then how that interplays with people's identities, especially like group identities or people having a mixed identity. And then how that gets into activism or civics. And, you know, I have to make a confession to you, and this is, I think you're going to laugh at me, but, you know, Roland and we're both on a couple of internet group chats about activism resisting the genocide happening. And so I was always impressed with how thoughtful you were, how active you are. And part of me wanting to invite you on was kind of, to be honest, a sense of guilt of myself, because I've only gone to a couple of protests ever since the genocide began. I'm not really a protest guy, but also I didn't think I did enough early enough to stand up against genocide. I always try to be kind of a behind the scenes guy, talk to people about communication strategy and things like that. And so now, you know, trying to make up for that, I was like, let me get one of these people leading all the protests on, especially one who I'm very impressed with, think is very articulate. And then also the thing that I sang about kind of a bit embarrassed was, you know, I thought you were like a waspy white liberal, you know, college kid that was just interested in social justice. And I wanted to talk to you about like what got you involved in the anti-genocide movement. And then as we started talking to get ready for today's interview, you told me you're actually Palestinian. So I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about your family story and history. Because if I remember correctly, that came as a surprise to you a bit as well, or how did that work out?
You mean the thinking of me as being white and not Palestinian, or
No, of your own
that's the
kind of
surprise?
reconnecting with your Palestinian identity.
Yeah. I wouldn't quite use the word surprise, but I definitely grew up very not totally disconnected from it. But
Hmm.
we don't speak Arabic. We're not religious. The my grandpa, he was from Lyd. He was expelled in 1948, and he lived in Ramallah for a while, where he got a scholarship to the Friends. I think it's called the Friends Boys School.
Mhm.
at the Friends School in Ramallah, and eventually got sponsorship, came to the United States, and became a professor. And he was a professor of literature at Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio.
Mhm.
And he was Christian. My mom was raised Christian, but not. I don't know how often she went to church. And then, yeah, I wasn't really raised religiously. My grandma, she's white, so I'm a quarter Palestinian, and yeah, we grew up like talking about Palestine and stuff. But again, like we didn't speak Arabic. None of us had ever been there. By none of us, I mean myself, my cousins, my parents, aunts and uncles. Um, at least I don't think any of my aunts or uncles have ever been there. Um, and I went to college at Ohio State, and at first I was an engineering major, and we
Mm.
didn't have to take a language. But then after my first year, I transferred to physics, and physics you did have to take a language. So I decided to take Arabic, and so that would have been in 2015. I took my
Sure.
first Arabic class, and then the next summer, my grandfather passed away,
Mm.
and my mom used her inheritance, which wasn't huge. He was a professor, so he had some, and he invested to start a nonprofit. And she, without knowing any Arabic, like at all,
Right.
except for like Shukran maybe, he'd never been to the Middle East. She'd never been east of like France. He
Okay.
starts going to Palestine and living like a third of her life in Palestine, going on these like 3 month trips to with the mission of planting trees. She started a nonprofit. She did. She planted a bunch of olive trees, like thousands of at least 1,000 olive trees in Palestine, and
Wow.
yeah, started doing this like agricultural development stuff, working with people there. Not just like coming in like, oh, I know everything, right? Like she's working with people.
And it was all
Um,
this like kind of
yeah.
without you? Like you knew what was happening, but she would go by herself, or did you get to go too?
We have never been to Palestine together. The
Okay.
the summer after my grandfather, um, I went to, and I spent a summer in Amman studying, and I
Mhm.
went to Palestine for a while to travel. And I met, she like set me up with people to stay with and people to meet. So I did meet some of her people, but we've never been there at the same time.
Okay. And the nonprofit she started that's planting trees, what's it called?
It's called TreeWater Initiative.
Nice. And 1,000 trees so far.
That's estimate. I forget the exact number.
Okay.
Recently, we started a business. One of friend that my mom made while in Palestine. He lives in the West Bank and he's unemployed because it's you know not a lot of jobs, and also he used to work. He had an entry permit to work in Israel,
Mhm.
and those are really hard to get now. And so I started a business for him teaching Arabic online
Oh, nice.
to he's not teaching Arabic in Palestine. Everyone already speaks it around him. So yeah, I got
Obviously,
him.
yeah.
I've got him some. Yeah, I got him set up speaking or teaching Arabic online. So that's something we do through the nonprofit, and that's been my major contribution is kind of this stuff now. And we're looking at ways to expand that, offering a few different services or finding services that we can help our Palestinian friends offer online to help them get some income.
And so you had told me that you're also active with two groups here in Colorado, the Democratic Society, our Students for a Democratic Society, and the Orediggers Against Apartheid. Can you talk a little bit about each group and what you do with them?
Yeah, so with I'm here at the School of Mines, and I I was an activist when I was younger, more of an environmental activist, and that my dad actually was a kind of part of starting the Green Party. And when I was in college, I was the
Wow.
like
Like
he wasn't like
nationally?
the person who did it. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
like he was participated in one of the first it was called Green Committee of Correspondence. I think it was actually in Estes Park.
Uh-huh.
So whatever. But anyway, and then yeah, my mom's Palestinian, so kind of definitely activist, come from this kind of family.
Uh-huh.
But then yeah, so about little more than a year ago, maybe like November or forget exactly when. Actually, it was a little bit after October 7th. I saw SDS at Mines tabling for, or just one person tabling for them, and they were going to have a rally for Palestine. And I was already going to be out of town during that rally, but I was like, I should do something. I should be involved in this. And so I got involved, and the first thing I went to there during the next like career fair, they had like an informational session on war profiteering companies, or companies that were profiting off of what's happening in Palestine, that were at our career fair. And I think there were like 3 or 4 other people there. It was mostly just like the main people. I got to know them, and by the end of that semester, I had an event that had 80 people. So that was
Wow,
just
that's
having some friends in Palestine talk. But it was like hybrid Zoom in person,
okay.
and we had some of our friends, 2 friends in Palestine, as well as an Israeli activist who I met through some other connections. She's a big anti-Zionist activist in Israel, and so I had the Palestinians speak as well as her. That
Okay.
had like 80 people, and then now we've been doing a lot of film screenings. We've been focusing on education stuff. We screen a lot of films about Palestine, and really, education is kind of. I mean, I really believe that sustainable social change, like massive and sustainable social change, requires a shift in public consciousness. And I see myself as, helping with, Palestinian liberation, is contributing to this change in public consciousness within the United States. Yeah. And then the other group, Orediggers Against Apartheid, is another group that some people we started here that's focused on global human rights issues. So we've done some events about what's happening in Congo, but we don't have any like Congolese students who are like really driving this, so it's a little harder. Yeah, there's nobody who has the connection to or the knowledge about Congo that I have about Palestine, and same with Sudan. We don't really have anyone to do that, so it's a little harder for us to really organize around that. But we
Well,
do some stuff.
that's really interesting though, because one of the criticisms I always hear from the Zionist side, like the extreme Zionist side, is if this
Yeah,
was happening anywhere in the world, y'all wouldn't care. And it just seems like
yeah,
they're just
yeah.
erasing the activism and all the real evidence, because almost every protest I've been to, you will see not only diverse people, but you'll see people at a Palestine protest with Sudanese, with Congolese flags, with
hmm
solidarity. And they're not on the outskirts or counter protesting. They're like fully embraced as part of the Palestinian protest. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah.
Because I think this idea that this is uniquely an issue because people hate Jews so much
hmm
is just a canard, and I think it's false. In fact, can you also talk about Jewish Voice for Peace and how you work with them, or if you do work
Yeah.
with them?
So I have one of my closest friends from college. He is still. So I did my undergrad at Ohio State, and he is still there
Hmm.
doing his PhD. And last semester, I gave a lecture on like calling it history of Palestine, focus on just from. We actually only got up to the end of the mandate. So we started, kind of first wave of immigration, 1882, and up to 1948 is what we covered. And I wanted to talk about the development of Zionism and like the history of like the idea of it. And I was like talking to him about it. He was like, "Man, I wish I could just do this section of the presentation for you." And I was like, "You can." So we had him zoom in, and
I'm
so
assuming he's Jewish.
yeah, he's Jewish, and he does organize with Jewish Voice for Peace in Ohio. And we don't have like a JBP on our campus or anything, but I definitely like know some of the people in Denver and stuff. But I wouldn't say like I like organize with them, just because yeah, it's not like direct people I organize with. But kind of the larger question of this point of, well, why aren't you talking about what's happened with these other terrible things? And I absolutely agree with you that of it being a canary or like a fallacy.
Hmm.
And there's a few reasons. The first one is that just because something else terrible is happening, or just because other people do terrible things, it doesn't mean you should do terrible things. By you, I mean the general you,
Right.
right? And going off of that, the second thing or related is okay, are you then putting yourself in the same bucket as the M23 movement? Is that what you're doing? When someone says that to me, and someone said that to me recently, like, well, why aren't you talking about Congo or what's happening in Congo? And this is a Zionist. I'm like, or I should have said this, but what I thought is like, okay, so are you saying that Israel is in the same bucket as the M23 movement? Like, is that because the M23 movement is like they're committing atrocities, that's the March 23rd movement. That's the name of the rebel group in the
Yes.
Eastern DRC. That's yeah. So do you want to be in that bucket? Is that because you're putting yourself there when you say that?
Right.
And the other thing is that I don't want to deny the connection that the United States has to the M23 movement, by extension, and more immediately the government of Rwanda, which is propping them up, or the connections that we have to the Rapid Support Forces.
Okay.
The rebel group in Sudan. I don't want to deny those things. I don't want to say that they're not true, but we are more directly complicit, and by we I mean American citizens, American taxpayers. We are more directly complicit with what's happening in Palestine, as our government is the primary sponsor of this. There's from October 2023 to September 2024, we sent $18 billion worth of weapons to Israel. Now, we do have involvement with M23 and with RSF, but it is not to that same degree. We also have involvement in creating the situation in which the crisis in Congo started, right? With the assassination of Patrice Lumumba half a century or so ago, more than half a century ago, right? That was right. American and British operation. There's the reason that they had this dictator's American-British operation. So yeah, very real. But with Israel, it's direct. It's like, as a U.S. taxpayer, your money is going to this, and that is something that I do think makes it a little bit different.
Oh, I think it's very, very different because, I mean, not only
Yeah.
is it front and center in the news, but like the aid packages to Ukraine and Israel often have been contingent upon each other or combination packages,
Yeah.
and everyone's aware of it. So, a lot of people don't know anything about the histories that you're talking about in Congo or in Sudan. I'm
hmm
very surface level about those things, so I don't, you know, a lot of things people could tell me, and I'd have to go look up to know what's true and what's not true.
One
But for
thing,
sure, yes, sir.
I was gonna say, there's this podcast, or new like a media group I like called Popular Front, and they have a podcast where the host just interviews journalists
Hmm.
in conflict zones across the world, and he has an episode or multiple episodes interviewing journalists in these places in Congo and Sudan. So that's something that where I've really appreciated learning about it from just journalists on the ground there through that podcast. It's
Well,
Popular
and for
Front.
our viewers, I'll put the link to that in the description to this video.
Yeah.
One of the things I kind of want to keep talking about is this idea of mixed identities, because you were telling me about how you
Yeah.
called yourself 1/4 Palestinian. I always joke with my kids because
Yeah.
my mother's Mexican, so I call them 1/4 Mexican.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, for some of the people, who are either bigots or who take a really hard line stance on identity issues, especially when it gets to racism. It doesn't matter if you're 1/16 or 100%. Like the minute you have anything that they don't like, it's
hmm
all that's who you are. So, like, how do you navigate um, being a Palestinian with the other parts of your identity, and how does that motivate you towards opposing genocide?
So, yeah, one thing that I say is, I have the privilege that I'm white until I say I'm Palestinian, or I'm not Palestinian until I tell someone that I'm Palestinian. And I definitely see myself as white. Also, like I don't say I'm like either white or Palestinian. I think I'm white and I think I'm Palestinian. And um, the the identity part of it, like I do try to be very conscious of how much I try to like claim to represent Palestinians in Palestine. I mean, first of all, I don't think any one person should ever be like the voice of an entire group unless like maybe if everyone in that group like elected that person. But I don't
Even then,
think
though,
like, oh, yeah, like the
yeah,
Palestinian perspective, like, oh, like this book is a good example of the Palestinian perspective. It's like I try not to really say it quite like that, or it's a Palestinian perspective. But yeah, so like I definitely think of that. And as far as like my identity, how much of what I do is due to my heritage? It's hard for me to say, right? It's how
You know,
much what I care about this is, yeah,
that's exactly where I was hoping to get, because like when I reflect upon myself, I keep thinking to myself, like, if I wasn't a Muslim and if it wasn't my co-religionists who were suffering there, would I care as
yeah,
much as I do? And sometimes I don't know if I like my own reflection on that. Like I generally have voiced opposition to atrocities anywhere and everywhere, but more, to be honest, a lot of times it's kind of in passing. I'm disgusted by it. I don't like it, but like there's a lot of uh, I think sometimes hypocrisy sometimes, and then other times just unawareness. Like I saw a meme the other day. It says, "Oppression doesn't bother anyone until it bothers them." And you contrast that with MLK's famous saying that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
yeah,
And so this is kind of getting to the heart of like really why I wanted to interview you, because you tell me that you often interface with people and you have this discussion about like why should they care. What does that bring
yeah.
to mind when I say these things to you?
So I'll start with the last thing you said, why they should
Sure.
care. There is the similar to what you said, just generally and genuinely caring about injustice, regardless of whether or not it's someone who you relate to or somebody that you know. I think that's a good thing. Then there is the more direct involvement. Like I said, the United States is very directly involved in what's happening. And so by being a US taxpayer, you are also, involved in this. Um, then there is the aspect of people in your life, people who care about me for whatever reason because we're friends. They now are more likely to care about Palestine because not because they care about, or not initially because they care about Palestinians, but because they care about me and it affects me and it affects how I feel. And I think that is a very, very major part in most issues, right? I think if you have a, I asked somebody this question recently, someone who's white, and their response was that their sister, I think, I'm gonna get some details wrong, but basically they they're due to, I think, their sister, they went to this event where somebody, either the friend or cousin of, I think, do you remember the name of the American who was run over by an Israeli bulldozer, like in
Rachel Corrie.
Gaza in like the early two? Yeah, Rachel Corrie.
Rachel Corrie. Yeah.
Yeah, one of Rachel Corrie's either friends or siblings was like leading this thing, and the person I was talking to went to it, and like that just like struck them, and for their whole family is like, ever since that had happened, this was like 10 years ago, this event, and ever since that happened, they have all like just always thought about Palestine, always cared about Palestine. And it was partially because of how, terrible what happened to Rachel Corrie was, but also because it impacted someone in their community. Like someone in their community was Rachel's, again, I forget, friend or sibling. Yeah, the back to the initial point was the immediate proximity, or proximity to someone who it does affect
Mhm.
directly. I think is a very powerful thing. But yeah, just like injustice, I think. And another thing that I think, the fact that it is controversial, I think it makes some people care about it more, right? Because there is a pro-Israel movement,
Mhm.
on campuses. It kind of makes people want. Or I would say, that I think inspires some degree of interest in it at least. And I mean, I don't know how much I would say how much to credit to that versus the other aspects, but those are the
So
things I think about.
is it fairly common that you see pro-Israeli activism on college campuses, both in Ohio when you were there and here in Colorado?
Ohio State, there's definitely a larger movement because it's an enormous school.
Hmm.
I know CU Boulder, there's definitely tension up there. There's a lot of Zionists in Boulder, and I think they even have an SSI, which is Students Supporting Israel. The Boulder, I'm not entirely certain. Mines, it is pretty. Yeah, there's some Zionists at my school, and they've been trying to get me for sure.
What
And
do you mean? What do you mean
they've
when they
been
say
kind
trying
of
to get you?
so they had a fundraiser recently for the JNF, the Jewish National Fund,
Mhm.
which I'll I'll real briefly say why the JNF is awful. And the JNF controls 13% of the land in Israel, whereas the Israeli Land Authority controls 80 or no 80 additional percent. So between the two of them, 93% of all of the land in Israel is owned. The JNF explicitly refuses to allow Palestinians to use their land. So that's 13% of all the land in Israel that Palestinian citizens are not allowed to use. Now the rest of that 80%, so now we're up to 93% total, including the two, again, that's run by the Israeli Land Authority, and many of the members of I think the board are JNF members themselves, and they institute less direct but still policies in order to prevent Palestinians from using that land. And that is one of the main ways in which Palestinians are discriminated against in Israel. Also, the JNF is responsible for planting a large number of forests and creating a large number of national parks in Israel. Many of those national parks were created because in 1948, after the Palestinians were expelled, people didn't want to live in a lot of their homes. They didn't want to live in homes where somebody else was just killed or expelled. You know, the settlers, the new settlers coming in, didn't want to live there, so they destroyed them and they planted forests. And the Palestinian, I think it's called the Palestinian Land Agency, is a nonprofit. There's a report. I mean, I actually have it like right over here. I printed the whole thing. It's like 400 and some pages. Like just to really be on brand for me and what I do. You can, I think it's in one of these. Although it might be in my other book, which I'm not sure where it is. Oh yeah, no, it's this one. This is the report. It's the Atlas of. So yeah. Anyway, so the almost every national park in Israel, these forests were created in part as ways of erasing the fact that Palestinians used to live there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were having these fundraiser for it, and I went up to them and I was talking to them about it, and they were tabling for it in my building, like pretty much close to outside my office.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them about it. And first, there was a holiday, and but then as part of the event they were having for the holiday, they were fundraising for the JNF. And so at first I was asking them about their holiday, you know, like, I don't have any problem with your holiday, like, that's cool, it's a holiday, right? And then I was like, and why are you fundraising for the JNF? And they were like, well, they plant a lot of trees. And I was like, if there's an organization in America that owned 13% of all land in America and did not lease it to black people, would you fundraise for that organization? And they were like, well, it's complicated. And we talked for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't kind of super productive. They eventually asked me to leave, and I left for about 20 minutes. Then they filed a report against me that I had bullied. I think I was accused of bullying and disruption. And they said in their report that they asked me to leave multiple times, and I would not leave. And so we had this kind of my word against theirs thing,
Sure.
except not, because I recorded the entire thing. And I just gave the person who was doing the investigation the recording, and they looked like fools because they just like, I had total evidence that, specifically that I had been asked to leave, because that in our student code of conduct, that is what would have made it a violation, right? Because I'm allowed to go talk to people, but if they ask you to leave and you can force it, then that is considered disruption or bullying, and that did not happen. And proved it with a recording, which was quite convenient. They also, we do movie screenings, and there's been one movie screening that the cops showed up to, and it was also the one that the Zionists showed up to. So we think maybe they've been kind of trying to get the cops on us. And then just a few other things, like they tried to like gaslight me, and so someone sent a message in our Discord about like how do you cope with seeing what's happening in Palestine over like day after day? Like how do you all cope with this? So a number of us sent like rather, personal or rather just emotional messages about it. It's a very serious topic.
Yeah, it's dark.
And my message, which everyone who I've talked to about this agreed with, was not like concerning. It was actually, I would say most people were like, thought it was like hope inspiring. But anyway, after that, these two of the Zionist leaders on our campus, they like sent a message to the president of my organization saying that they thought that they should fill out a risk or a report that I was like going to kill myself because I thought it was like a suicide note.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it was
So
not
the
like it. Just be clear, it was not that. I do not feel that way. And every single person who I've talked to about this who read the message was like, "That is the most ridiculous thing." So it seems like this you know very specific effort to defame me.
and so basically on this Discord, did you know that those people were getting the information there? Was it supposed to be kind of a closed group or is it open?
Our Discord. We don't like vet people, so we do like engage as if the what we
In good
post
faith.
is relatively public.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do like we hope that people who are in it are engaging in good faith, but we are aware that we do not perceive it to have security. No, we are aware that it's not secure, and so we don't really share things that are super sensitive there. Like,
Well,
but
and the
this was
reason
just like my emotional kind of.
no, the
Yeah.
reason I was asking that was just to kind of make it abundantly clear that um, when you stand up and speak out for Palestine or against the genocide, that people are working to infiltrate groups and to mischaracterize,
Yeah.
what's said. And that brings me kind of to one of the bigger questions I want to ask you is, now we're in the era of Trump 2.0 and, there's a massive campaign to target student protesters. Um, you, I'm assuming, are a natural born citizen, right? Two
Yeah.
generations deep, I would think, at least,
Yeah. I'm
at
my
least on
mom's
one
side.
side
My
of your
dad.
family.
My dad's good father. Yeah.
Right. And so I saw this video interview with a guy named Wajihat Hussein, Wajihat Ali, I'm sorry, Wajihat Ali. And he has a Substack called The Left Hook, and he's kind of like a leftist. And he was talking to a historian who's a Caucasian woman. And she was talking about the hands-off movement. And she said something that I'm still kind of debating in my head. I almost pulled the clip up and I was going to play it for you, but I didn't want to spend too much time on it. Um, but she said essentially, this historian, she goes, look, I'm a white, you know, baby boomer woman. And she was basically saying, like, to the brown and black people out there, let us lead on this one because it's safer. And the first thing I thought was, okay, that's kind of makes sense, but we've seen what happens when the people who directly involved aren't at the table, aren't leading their own movements. Uh, and so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because this is an addition of, for me, identity and one of the conflicts of it, like how to get multiple groups working together for a common cause and then still let the representation be true to the people most
Hmm.
affected. Do you have thoughts about what
Well,
she said?
yeah. I mean, first of all, Palestinian Americans who have U.S. citizenship, it is responsible to. I would say that that's the group that could help fill that gap of still having a Palestinian-led movement. And when it comes to that, like at the School of Mines where I go, like I very much feel like I am that voice. I've met two other Palestinian students here, and one of them has like kind of showed up to some stuff, but I've like, actively tried to bring them in and make space for them, but they just didn't. I mean, it's a hard, pretty hard school. They just didn't really have the time. But point being, I really much feel like this is my like movement. Like I feel like in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement, I felt like a white person. And I was like, okay, like how do I be an ally? Should I speak up or do I like not speak up? So, because then I would just, if I did, I would just be like taking up space when I should just uplift other people's voices. But
Hmm.
it was like, do I buy like the anti-racism book or do I buy the white fragility book? Like, I should learn about these things. But now I very much feel like this is like my movement and it is everyone who needs to listen to me. And part of the reason I feel that way within my school is because no other Palestinians have made themselves very known. One other person has, and she comes around sometimes. She also just graduated, but but then I spend a lot of time in New York City, and I go to organizing meetings there, and people are like speaking in Arabic sometimes, and I feel like I'm the white man then, but yeah, I guess so.
So you can have
How to
your own version of
reconcile?
code switching, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like. Well, just as far as like if if there's a place where a leader is needed, if there's a vacuum, which
Mhm.
there is here, then I'll step up. But I'm not trying to trample over other people. And within Colorado, there's definitely a lot of Palestinians. And
Right.
when I say what I said, I specifically mean within our campus and
And mines, right.
specifically, yeah, yeah, yeah. But and yeah, so like events in Colorado, like in Denver, I show up and I don't really take ownership. I wouldn't say, and I try to follow and be supportive. But yeah, so people in America, they were kind of made a point. Americans or Palestinians in America who are not citizens, yeah, like that's you got a lot to risk, and if you want to like make yourself really known, like you, I'm not going to tell you not to, but I'm also not going to expect you to do that, because it really should be up to people like me, and then people who maybe look like and have Arabic names, but are full citizens. Then yeah, like it's up to, I would say, people like this. And there is, I recently learned there is a difference as far as protection goes between someone like me who's born as a citizen and a naturalized citizen. It is possible to denaturalize a U.S. citizen, and if the green card holders go down, like if Mahmoud gets deported, then the next on the chopping block would be
Naturalized.
denaturalized people, which and so that would then create, I would say, more of a situation where it's like, okay, people like me really do need to make themselves be more outspoken and take kind of the spotlight, because then that all the naturalized citizens would be under more scrutiny.
Yeah, thanks for that. Because when I heard that clip, she was talking about the hands-off movement. So not specifically Palestine, but just general resistance to Trump overall. And I guess the hands-off movement,
Yeah,
if you could say it had one rallying point, it's kind of a return to rule of law. Um,
and I definitely have a lot to say about hands off within Colorado too. If you want to
yeah,
hear
let me hear your
that,
thoughts
we
because
can
I
segue.
go for it.
So not last weekend, the major rally that happened 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
hands off slash 50-51. There was on the same day, same place, both like 12 o'clock, Denver Capitol. There was a parallel rally, Stop the Genocide rally, and I saw both, and I'm like looking at these two images. I'm like, is this the same thing? It's the same time. It's the same place. One says, PSL, Stop the Genocide. One says 50-51, hands off, no more Trump. And so there was this a little bit of conflict. I don't know if you were there, but
No, unfortunately, I
like
couldn't.
the Stop the Genocide rally was like they had different speakers, and they were like at the bottom of the hill. And then they marched first. I marched with them. The 50-51 rally stayed behind, and then they later marched. And there's been a lot of criticism of 50-51 as being like controlled opposition.
Yeah.
And but I will tell you that 50-51 in Colorado is working to bring in a lot of other organizations, and they're looking to recognize, yeah, that there's a lot of other activism. And so if you go to the rally this weekend, I think it'll look a lot different, and it won't be as split. We will have a table there. As SDS, we will be tabling, and I'll just be trying to talk to as many, libs as I can about Palestine and get them to, realize the truth.
This is a great
And
segue
then,
because you made sure to
well,
tell me before we started recording that SDS was not affiliated with the Democrat Party. Can you talk a little bit about what
yes,
SDS is about, what they're for? And then I have a
yeah,
follow-up question about controlled opposition.
okay. The last thing I want to say about that though is over the
Sure.
weekend, if you followed 50-51 National or New York on
Mhm.
Instagram, they were promoting the Palestinian Youth Movement's protest.
Worth
So Palestinian Youth Movement had a Free Mahmoud protest, I think on Saturday, and
Mhm.
50-51 was, they shared a flyer. It wasn't the same flyer, but it was same time, same place, and it wasn't like a separate thing. So they were promoting PYM's. So that to me was like, okay, like they're not like they're trying to bring Palestine into the movement, which and so yeah, and I'll segue SDS. Yeah, we Students for a Democratic Society, as in the system democracy, not the party.
Yeah.
And we are a broadly progressive group, multi-issue group,
Mhm.
and we're nonpartisan. And at Mines, a school that has a very apolitical campus. For those who don't know, it's an all science and engineering school. It's a fairly small school, and it's definitely more conservative than most college campuses, and more than so conservative. I would say it's just apolitical. But
But
we're the
really
only
top-notch
political group on.
education, though. I mean, like for engineering, it's
Yeah,
one of the
yeah,
best
yeah.
schools.
Yeah. So within the state of Colorado, being a mines grad, like mines student, gives you like some like credit. Feel like, oh, like they must be smart. Like a number of us went to a Jefferson County school board meeting to speak in support of this act, the Kelly Loving Act, which is going through the state Congress. And we're aware that the school board is not the state Congress, but it is. It was a number of people were speaking there about
Mhm.
it. It wasn't just us. So, and when we all got up and said like, oh, like we're mine students, people are like, oh, yeah, this is credibility. They were actually gassing up Mines a lot in the meeting about some programs they have. So yeah,
Well, I asked that
it gives you this.
specifically because I wanted my audience to
Yeah,
know that you're very sharp and that you're not just speaking out of, like some internet troll doing conspiracy research. So that's one of the reasons I
yeah,
brought that up.
yeah. But so with the campus, we're the only political group that's not conservative. We have Turning Point USA and Young Americans for Liberty as well. Those, I think, the three of us are the only political groups, and they're conservative. I think Young Americans for Liberty is kind of like anarcho-capitalist. I don't really know exactly what they do,
Kind
but
of libertarian and towards that bent of libertarianism lately, for sure.
yeah. So um, the okay, yeah, about SDS, we're not, yeah. So we're not like Democrats. Think one thing I said is anyone in our group who voted for Kamala was not happy about it.
Yeah.
And I see this movement, the broader like Hands Off 5051 movement, as an opportunity to introduce a lot of people to more progressive politics, and also um, if we can bring the Palestine issue into it, I think that is very productive. I don't think we're gonna, there are some people who are like burn it all down kind of thing, like, socialist revolution. I don't think that's going to happen in the next few years in the United States. And so I think that the more clear way for people in my life who live in Palestine, Palestinians in my life who live in Palestine, and the millions of others who I don't know, to have rights and safety is by the United States Democratic Party making Free Palestine part of their platform, and then a Democrat getting elected. I'm not saying that's certain. I say that was my perspective. I see that that is an opinion of mine. Is that was what was
Can
I
we
forget
pause right
exactly
there?
what your question was? Yeah,
Well, the reason I asked is a couple of things. Like a lot of us are seeing pretty viral clips of AOC and Bernie at the anti-oligarchy tours.
yeah,
And there's one in particular where a group of Palestinian activists or anti-genocide activists put out a Palestinian
yeah.
flag. And I'll cut to the clip and then we'll come back. But, essentially the police officers are trying to take the flag. They take it back and there's a little bit of struggle. They re-put out the flag. The whole time Bernie's speaking and he's kind of putting his hand up and bringing it down to like kind of calm the audience. But I think it was in Ohio actually. And everyone was chanting Free
I think it was
Palestine.
in Idaho.
Idaho. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so the clip was going and the whole crowd was chanting Free Palestine and Bernie was silent, trying to get them to be silent. And then the police were literally escorting these people out, um, kind of not violently, but forcefully a little bit. And everyone's using it to call AOC and Bernie controlled opposition. And then I contrast that with an interview I did with the first Palestinian and Muslim Georgia state elected official. Her name is Representative Rua Roman. She was actually going to speak at the DNC to endorse Kamala Harris until the Democratic Party specifically said, we're not going to have a Palestinian speaker. And
yeah.
then she gave her speech, to alternative media and it went viral because she joined the undecided movement. Um, And that took a lot of bravery, I think, because she's officially part of the Democratic Party. She withdrew her endorsement of Kamala Harris. And then she even encouraged split ticket voting and vote swapping. And for those who don't know, vote swapping is like when you live in a safe state, you will vote against a candidate, and then you'll swap the vote with someone in a swing state so that it doesn't, like benefit the opposition, like it doesn't benefit Trump in this case.
Yeah.
And so what she said to me in our interview, and you're my second guest, by the way, on the show, what she said to me that was so interesting was that she takes all the criticism specifically pointed to AOC with a big chunk of salt, because when she first won her election, she said that AOC sent out a fundraising email for her without even being asked. She just did it to support her because she saw a person of color, a Palestinian woman, get elected office, and helped her raise without her asking, like $30,000 so that she could hire campaign staff, she could hire staff to serve her constituents, and she said that in the context of saying that she wants to change the dynamics so that people can effectively stand where they want to stand morally without losing their seat. So this controlled opposition idea, I'm kind of torn because, Bernie twice has endorsed, the people that stabbed him in the back, from Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden, and campaigned for them.
Mm-hmm.
And both times really kind of turned an entire movement off. And in, I think, a lot of ways made people just leave politics and leave civics altogether. And then now you're hearing this about the hands-off movement. And I really enjoyed the fact that you kind of have what you think is a realistic approach. It's like, for sure, Republicans aren't ever going to be necessarily, pro-Palestinian or anti-genocide, but
it'll take a lot more to get them. It'll take a lot more.
This idea of controlled opposition, I really respect that you're looking at it with a lot of nuance. And I kind of wanted to ask you, building on what we've said so far, something I struggle with. Sometimes I say pro-Palestinian, sometimes I say anti-genocide. My gut wants me to say anti-genocide all the time, but my head tells me that will help the erasure of the Palestinian identity. Do you have any gut reaction or thoughts to that?
I like to say Palestinian liberation movement.
Okay.
That's what I like to say. Now, I
know
that
we're getting into semantics, but
yeah, because it is about liberation. It's about freedom. There's a lot of people who say like pro peace movement, especially there's a lot of like Israelis, I'm not even the liberal Zionists, like people who there's a whole movement like this, and they have like within Israeli citizens, and there's a whole movement of trying to just call it pro peace, which okay, if you get more people to support ending the genocide and ending apartheid because you call it pro peace, people who would not support it if you call it Palestinian liberation, whatever. But I do think what I call it when I'm not talking to those people, right? When I'm talking to people who maybe just don't know much, like Americans who aren't Arab or Jewish or Muslim, is Palestinian liberation. Some people who I don't know, some people might hear isn't that like a political party or something, like the PLO, but yeah. I don't know, I haven't ran into that yet, but it's definitely don't mean it to be a partisan phrase. And yeah, I mean, that's why a lot of people say Palestinian solidarity movement. But for me, it kind of goes back to the identity thing of is it solidarity for me, or is it my own movement? Because it's not my rights. It's not my, I think I do have a right of return as a refugee, because at least in the UN definition, it says, or at least last time I checked their page, it says descendants of refugee males are also can register. So does that mean that since my grandpa was very much actually a refugee, very much forced from his home in 1948, I could register as a refugee? I don't know, and I honestly I don't really care too much, because I have refuge. I'm not seeking refuge. I'm an American citizen. And people use, I think, people like me a lot to really defame the whole refugee crisis. People oh well, Palestinian refugees, the status is passed down, it's inherited, and that's a whole Zionist claim. It's okay, there are people like me, but there's also roughly 3 million people living in refugee camps in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And those people are not me. Those people, like, those people are real refugees, and other countries too, but most of them are in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And those people need it, it's there.
One of the
Those
things
people
that
as well as the people in Palestine.
one of the things
Anyway,
I found
sorry.
no, of course, I want you to get as many of your thoughts out. I just wanted to bring this back to something we kind of talked earlier about. Um, when I participated on an interfaith trip to the Holy Land, it was with a group of predominantly different Christian denominations, but also a couple of Muslims, one from Turkey, one who was Egyptian American. Um, Long story short, we flew into Amman, and then we visited the refugee camp there. And then we met with Palestinian Christian activists. And then this is a little bit too much about me for an interview with you, but it's going to set up a question. I had just left working for the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I had just graduated. So at the time, I was between employment and I was on this international trip. So we were crossing the King Hussein Bridge, and there's that
I've been
no
there.
man's,
Yeah.
that no man's zone between
Yeah.
Jordan and Israel, right? Where it's just landmines and 50 caliber machine guns pointed at each other. And when we got off, it kind of looked like, back then it was like 2007. It kind of looked like a Greyhound bus station was the kind of crossing point.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was in line with all the white people, and the Turkish woman and the Egyptian American were in the line with all the brown people. And I had just done Hajj like 2 years before that, the pilgrimage for Muslims.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
once they saw my passport and they saw the Hajj stamp in it, I got yanked out of that line, put into the brown people line, and then I was denied entry. Like, quite literally, I didn't get to finish the interfaith trip. I had to stay in Amman. And it was a Friday, so it was right before Shabbat. And if it wasn't from a man from Nablus, I would have been sleeping on a bus station with mines all around me, locked outside of Israel, but not able to get back into Jordan. He saw me, and he saw the commotion, and he offered me a ride back to the hotel I was at before the trip. And then they went on to plant trees, visit Masjid al-Aqsa, and all that stuff. Now, I'm saying way too much about myself, but I'm saying this to ask two things. One, being that you just said you were at the King Hussein Bridge, have you traveled
Yeah.
through Palestine, Israel, West Bank, or Gaza? And then what is the experience, if you have gone through the checkpoints for Palestinians, like?
So, King Hussein Bridge, I tell people that was the only time in my life I felt like I did not have white privilege because they knew.
Yeah, I could relate, bro.
They knew. Yeah, they knew I was Palestinian. I got like strip searched. I got interrogated. I got detained. I did get in, but it was like about half a day I was there. They went through all my stuff.
Well, Mossad questioned me for like 6 hours.
It wasn't that long, yeah, but I had a bunch of climbing gear with me, like rock climbing gear. I was a big climber. And so they were like, "What is this stuff?" But anyway, I eventually did get in. As far as my time in Palestine, I first went to Ramallah, and my mom had set me up with some people to stay with because she had been there doing work with her nonprofit already. And I went to the climbing gym on my first day there, and I walked in. There's this climbing gym in Ramallah, and I walked in, and people were like, "Oh, new person. Like, who are you? Like, you're our friend now." It was awesome. Like, I met all these people. They're like, "We're going climbing outside tomorrow," and I went climbing outside with them. Like, made like all kinds of friends. And there's actually I don't have to take too long on this tangent. But after that, I was like, someone needs to like make a film about the climbing community in Palestine. And a few years later, it happened, and there's a film about the climbing community in Palestine. It's good. It's called Resistance Climbing.
Do you have a link to
It
it?
was actually uh, I could share with you, yeah, but it's called
Yeah.
Resistance Climbing, and it was part of the Real Rock film tour. So if you look up Real Rock Resistance Climbing, and the premise of the film is actually this climbing journalist named Andrew Bisharat from Boulder, or he lives in Boulder now,
Wow.
going to Palestine because because his grandpa was from there, and
Kind of like
documenting
you,
it. And
yeah.
yeah, it was like, yeah, the film very it strikes me very like I did the same trip, except for me it was to study Arabic, but it was the similar like going to where my grandpa was from, and I that was the first when then last semester when we started the film screenings at Mines, that was the first film we screened, and we got Andrew to speak He didn't come. He zoomed in, and then the guy who actually started bolting roots and started the climbing gym in Palestine is also from Colorado. He came and he spoke in person, so that was really cool.
That's phenomenal.
But yeah, so I was in Ramallah, and then I went climbing and stuff, and then I went to Hebron.
Hmm.
That was very different. I like broke down, and then I was like walking through checkpoints to get from one part of the old city to the other, and I mean, I like showed him my American passport, and like I was fine, but it was I went through the checkpoint. I didn't have to deal with the humiliation that Palestinians have to deal with, because I'm an American, and but it was definitely like seeing the occupation, seeing how the streets that have like wire protecting them because the settlers will throw like their trash into the street, and seeing soldiers that was way different, and it really was like, oh yeah, like
What year was this?
that was hard. 2017.
Okay.
And it was actually Trump came to on his first visit to Israel. I think while I was there, there was like some protest stuff. I think it was that. I could be missing a detail, but the summer of 2017. Um, yeah. So I mean, yeah, people definitely there were like very much like thank me, like oh thank you, like welcome home, like thank you for coming back, which feels really great. And my mom has described a similar experience,
Uh,
and she's also just told me a story that her dad told her about how when a taxi driver, like he told a taxi driver in Palestine once that he was from there, like he's Palestinian, but he lived in America. He like made him get out because he was so mad at him because he left.
oh,
And I was like, we were like, people never treat us that way and my mom was like talking about that. I was like, yeah, mom, it's because we never left. Like you didn't leave. You were born
yeah.
in America and you decided to come back. So like, not to say that either way is like fair or unfair, but
Mhm.
just to say people definitely are very welcoming. Very much when I tell them, my grandpa's from here, very much, get a lot of welcome homes, stuff like that, even though my Arabic is very bad. Uh, um, but yeah, so yeah, I think that answer the. Oh yeah, and then on my last day in Hebron, I just walked through a checkpoint to the settlement and got on a bus and went to Jerusalem because I wanted to go to Jerusalem, and it was like also just wildly different experience. Yeah.
Um, did you get in contact with the Palestinian Christian community while you were there, and any insights about that?
No, not I did not. But my mom, we have some. My mom is Amash.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so Justin Amash is my second cousin, the
Oh
former
wow,
congressman from
yes.
Michigan. I don't really know him. We
He
met,
had
but
family
yeah, but
members die in an airstrike during the
yeah,
genocide.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so my mom knows some of the people in the St. Porphyrius Greek Orthodox Church,
Mhm.
the one of the large old churches in Gaza. Yeah, like my mom's in contact with some of her relatives who have been like sheltering in that church and stuff. So they're Christians, and yeah. So my mom has met like people that were like extended relatives, like other Amashes,
Mhm.
who are Christians, and so yeah, my
Well, the
mom,
reason I
yes,
ask
the
is
question, but me, not really.
the reason I ask is when I was there, and again, I was there probably a decade before you went, because it was right after I
Yeah,
graduated. That was 2006, so it must have been 2007. Um, but the thing is, when we met uh, the activists at the refugee camp in Amman, we also then met with a delegation of Palestinian Christians, and the sense that I walked away from that was that it's kind of a propaganda piece that the Christians are pushed out by the Muslims. It's more that the Christians are being pushed out just because they're Palestinian, and they're like a double
mm,
minority because the bulk of Palestinians tend to be either secular or Muslim, and then uh, that the Christian community is suffering under Israeli policies just as much as the Muslims are. And I
yeah,
just got this feeling. So I was wondering if you had any insights on that, which is why I asked, because it feels like a propaganda piece that's used against the Palestinian movement, to kind of
yeah.
smear them all as Islamists.
I don't want to speak on it too much because I don't know too
Yeah,
much,
I
but I
respect
will
that.
say I will just say that I personally I don't really think I've even heard too much of that, the idea that it is the Palestinian Muslims oppressing the Palestinian Christians. And I think what I've mostly I mean, actually I did meet a few Christians, but it definitely the division like Palestinian Christian, Palestinian Muslim, at least from what I observed, did not seem nearly as like it's like a minor thing relative to the division of like Palestinian versus Israeli. Like much,
So,
the gap was not your religion; it was that you're a Palestinian. Or what defined you? Yeah, I should say.
or what other people use to define you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
So we're getting pretty close to an hour, and I want to respect your time.
yeah.
And I also wanted to just kind of give you the opportunity to talk about a few things with your nonprofits. Um, but in closing, one of the things that I've been reflecting on with my interview with Representative Ruel Roman was I had asked her kind of like, why should non-Muslims, non-Arabs, non-Jewish people care about the issue of Palestine? And one of the things she said that struck me pretty deeply was that, like Georgia has anti-BDS laws on the books. Here in Colorado, there's a lighter one where like PARA, the
Yeah.
Employee Association's retirement plan, can't invest with BDS aligned funds or
Hmm.
organizations.
Yeah.
Um, and then she also mentioned how there's basically pro-Israel legislation and things happening at every level of society, all the way down to city councils. Um, and so, like it affects people whether they know it or not. And then she said the thing that was to me the real humdinger, or the real big point that should affect all Americans, is that it's really affecting not just our foreign policy, but even our domestic policy. When people are afraid to
Mm.
protest, people are getting, speech is being
Well,
criminalized and people are being deported. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are your views on what's most effective to reach out to people who are ignorant of, chosen not to pay attention to this issue? And then I wanted to close it with giving you a little bit of time to talk about, I think it's called TreeWater, the nonprofit you're doing,
yeah, TreeWater. Yeah.
and how people can support that, or if you have other causes or things you think people should be linking to. And we'll put all those in the description.
Yeah, I mean, you can support us. Most of our funds right now are going just directly to some of our friends in Palestine, and the most effective way to support my friends is to donate to us and for me to give you money. But you know, I, I'm not going to tell you to donate to us over top of or instead of say like PCRF, right? They like there's so much need, there's so much work, and um, but as far as the oh, and we have our website. Our website was down for a while, and we're getting it back up. So we don't have a website. We're on Instagram, TreeWater Initiative. If you DM that account, it's just my mom. She runs the account. As far as the question about how to reach people, this is something that I think about a lot because, like I said, what I see as my contribution to Palestinian liberation is through education. It is through or primarily through just making people realize that this is so messed up, like it's so terrible. And I definitely had a lot of success. We were tabling one day right next to the U.S. Navy on our campus, and the first guy I talked to, he was a U.S. Navy officer. His brother had served in the IDF, and by the end of our conversation, he told me that he was rethinking what he knew about Israel. Um, and there's a kid who's come, and I've talked to him a few times, and he's kind of like a liberal, moderate guy, and I mean, a lot of the points he's reiterated to me are just things you'll think if you see on CNN. And I mean, he said I just totally opened his eyes to what's happening, like what the West Bank is like, and like he's now like he tries to talk to like his family about it. And one way that I think is really effective is showing people movies. I say that the movies do the work for me. So we screened the film Where Olive Trees Weep on campus.
Mhm.
And after that, one of my friends, he like texted me, he was like, that was so like eye opening. Like I wanna do what I can. And I'm like, you could study for like 100 hours to learn all the things and be the spokesperson I am, or you could just tell people to watch that movie, and the movie will teach them. And so like, yeah, just like tell your parents to watch that movie. I think that movie is really great. I think it's really um, it covers a little more context than say like No Other Land. No Other Land is really great, and what No Other Land does as far as building this story and driving this narrative and making you connect to these characters. Where All of Choose Weep certainly doesn't do that. But no Other Land mostly is just like, this is what is happening in Masferiata, which is terrible, right? But I don't think No Other Land conveys just the whole, like, very much of how messed up everything the West Bank is, and yeah, the scope, the broad scope of the occupation. And I don't think it tried to, right? No Other Land's goal was to tell the story of Basil and Masferiata, and it did that very well. We screened that as well on campus. We got like over 100 people to see that. And people after that were like, told me, like, that's super eye opening. Also a great film, great option. Where All of Cheese Weep, I think, is just a little broader. We screened Gaza Fights for Freedom recently, and I think that film is pretty good as far as like context. There were two things in the film that I thought were a little bit more propaganda pieces than they should have been. If I were making the film, I would have done. Basically, they kind of made it seem like the Arabs, they really oversimplified the relationship between the settlers and the natives in the Mandate period, and I don't think it was good. They also kind of conveyed the idea that the Greater Israel idea is universal among Israeli politicians, and I don't think that's true. I think that is very directly promoted by some members, such as the Jewish Power Party and the National Religious Zionist Party. Those people openly talk about the Greater Israel plan. The Likuds, I don't know. I think they kind of reference it, but the Likuds and everyone to the center and left of them I don't think they openly endorse Greater Israel. So that I felt like was a little bit misleading, but overall that film is very convincing. So yeah, showing people a film, but as far as, I just talk to people. So like this Saturday, I will be at the Hands Off rally. We will have a table, and I'll just be trying to talk to as many people as I can. People there they're already think about politics. They already think about like what's happening in the country. They're enough to go to a rally. And so I think that's a really great,
Kind of an ideal audience,
very
right?
optimal. Yeah. And so just talking to people and asking questions, like be like, okay, like, but do you think this is right? And really exposing what it is that's wrong and challenging people's beliefs. But in a way that I think asking questions is really good, because if you get upset, if you get aggressive with someone, they're a lot less likely to listen to you. And I say it's training.
So just to make sure I heard you right, you like to use a tactic of asking questions rather than like entering debate, right? You like to hear people so they feel heard. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, like, people then will get to a point and I'll have to explain something, right? Because I understand history of Palestine quite well. I've read many books on it. I've been there. I talked to Palestinians, but as far as a question of like, do you think this is right? Like, do you think that people living under martial law, with a government, like a military that they have no representation in, like, you have to get them to understand the material conditions in Palestine.
Right.
And because a lot of people don't understand that. So getting them just describing the material conditions, and then, like, be like, do you know this, or is this right? And, but then also the thing that is actually really important that I haven't mentioned yet is individual stories. So like, if I describe what happened to my friend, like, actually some guy called me, or my friend called me once while I was tabling, talking to some kid on campus. And he's like, "Doc, like, they're here." And like, he like got off the phone and then like called me later. He's like, "Yeah, dude, they like came in, they beat me up, but like that kid, when he saw me answer this FaceTime call from my buddy in the West Bank, like,
And it was
he was like,
settlers that like raided his home.
no, it was the military.
Oh,
It was the occupation. It was not settlers. It was the military. They went just like the whole apartment building. Like, they're like knocking. He like unlocked the door for them because his neighbor didn't unlock the door, and they blew his door handle off. Like, you got to open. And but yeah, like, then the guy who I was talking to, as soon as I hung up, he was like, "Oh, so it's like martial law." So like, all the facts, all the statistics that I can say, they do something, but none of it did as much as just seeing me have the interaction with my buddy and hearing my buddy's voice come out of my phone. So yeah, the individual stories, I say numbers are just numbers to most people without the voices behind them. And so we got to uplift those voices. And I think the movies do that. That's part of the reason the movies are really good. And I can read people reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, but that doesn't do it as well as the voices. And I also give people a lot of books. This is my favorite one right now to give people, Perfect Victims.
Okay.
I've given people that book a lot. This book, 10 Myths About Israel, I like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Ilan Pape. This one, I only started giving this one out recently, being Jews after the destruction of Gaza.
I haven't read that yet,
Um,
but I saw some of his interviews and was fascinated.
yeah, Peter Bynum, I like Peter Bynum for sure. Definitely respect him. And but that book is like largely like to the Jewish community, and so it's
Hmm.
not really the you know uh, yeah. So I give it out too, but I don't want like the book that I give out
To
primarily to
represent,
be
yeah.
a yeah. But it is one of the book. I also give out 100 Years War on Palestine a lot, and I've given out the Question of Palestine a lot. So yeah, I mean I've spent hundreds and hundreds of my own dollars on just buying bulk books and giving them to people.
Well, that brings me, if you have a little bit more time, the last question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
I always try to leave my show on a message of hope. So I was going to ask you, it felt like your rock climbing experience was one of the most hopeful moments you had over there. But what was the biggest takeaway or lesson you would say from your life's experience so far? And where do you find hope for the future?
I think that Palestinians in America and the diaspora have a lot more hope than Palestinians in Palestine right now. And I think that, when I talk to some of my friends in Palestine who live the occupation, they don't, they have, some of them don't have hope. And that sucks. But I think, those of us in America, I think have a little more hope because we don't live under terrorism, constant terrorism. Um, but where I find hope is just more and more people listening and becoming more and more normalized. Like I was talking to a 5051 organizer and I gave her a reading list, and then she texted me like a screenshot of how she was listening to one of the books on the reading list, and just the number of like be supporting, at least, saying, okay, Israel is messed up. Maybe not all the way to what I believe, but at least being like, this is really messed up is becoming much more normalized in America, and that gives me hope.
Um, one more question, if it's okay. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
One of the reasons that I self-rationalize, like not going to protest so much for myself, and again, this is probably coming out of a bit of self-guilt, um, is that a lot of times, and I do think this is legitimate, a lot of times for many people, protesting is activism, all of it, right? They go home, they
yeah.
feel better because they shouted. But at the end of the day, like, and this would be worthwhile just by itself, because I've had so many friends who are Palestinian tell me that when they see news stories of massive protests in the US, it renews their hope in Palestine. That's why I thought of this question. Um, and so like that by itself, I think is worth it. But what are your views on what people should be doing after or in addition to protesting? Because it feels to me like protesting on itself is not enough.
We got to replace Michael Bennett, John Hickenlooper, and Brittany Pedersen, and a lot of the other representatives in Colorado. Pedersen is my representative. I don't know all the others, but they're all terrible. They're all um, they yeah. I mean, you were kind of talking about Bernie earlier. Bernie, AOC, they're not perfect, but they do at least vote against sending weapons to Israel, and that means a
Right.
lot, right? Bernie introduced this thing to block $8 billion worth of weapons to Israel. He might not be perfect, but mad props to him for doing that. Both of our senators, Democrats in the state of Colorado, voted against it. So getting rid of them, you can call them, tell them to vote against it, but it really doesn't seem like they're going to break from APAC. Same with at least my representative in District 7, Brittany Pedersen. She has met with many Palestinian community members many times, from what I've understood, and just will not get off APAC. She's taken over $100,000 from them. So getting rid of these politicians, and I should say replacing, getting rid of someone could be seen as like causing them physical harm. I don't mean that at all. We get getting different people elected
I
who are
mean,
not that.
primarying them and
Um,
putting better politicians in their
Primarying
place.
them,
Yeah.
exactly. Primarying them. That that is one thing. I mean, and people who maybe are movable, you can call them. Uh, but I mean, yeah, for me, it's going out and teaching people so that we can build this movement. Showing up to other protests, right? Like, if you or public meetings, right? We went to a Jefferson County School Board meeting to speak in support of trans youth. There was a conference. It was like the conference on safeguarding children from gender affirming care or something, and we rallied outside of that in protest of it, in support of trans kids.
Mhm.
Uh, Talking to people in your life, And I mean, yeah, I definitely don't have all the answers. I don't claim that my methods are the best methods or the only methods, but they're my methods. It's what I feel like I'm good at, what I feel like I'm comfortable with. And but targeted rallies, I think that is something for sure. Like if people are rallying outside of ICE detention centers, right? It's targeted, and you having clear demands, right? People are rallying outside of ICE detention centers in Colorado saying free Jeanette. We want Jeanette to be free, and applying pressure to our politicians. Bennett and Hickenlooper might not support Palestine, but they are against Trump's mass deportation. So if you want Jeanette to be free, then they might actually be able to help you with that. And give them credit for that, but don't. There's still what we still got to primary them. Even if they help free Jeanette, we still. So yeah, targeted messaging I think is important, and organizing in the sense of having a group that is working together, a group that is organized and then can mobilize for something. Like we have an organization, and so we were able to mobilize when we heard that there was this anti-trans group going to speak at the school board meeting. So being a part of an organization, and then within the broad 50-51 thing, I want to just reiterate that making this movement include our messaging, I think, is the way to go. Making rejecting AIPAC and being, supporting ending USA to Israel, rejecting AIPAC, making these things mandatory for politicians, I think is something that we could do through making it part of the 50-51 demand. Also part of 50-51's demand is overturning Citizens United, which is really important. And when I saw that was one of their things, I was like, I respect this a lot more, because overturning Citizens United, huge deal. But yeah, teaching the people there that Kamala Harris was not the solution. She was also, largely run by oligarchs. They were just different oligarchs, that it's, but yeah, so there's a lot there. I don't have one answer, and I don't claim to know the answer. I don't claim that my methods are the best, but
Well, we're all learning as we go. And tell me if I hear you wrong, but what I hear you is align with people where you agree, be able to have that as a strategic issue alignment. And that doesn't mean you're in the same boat with them on everything, and you oppose them where you disagree. Is that oversimplifying what you said, or do you think that's accurate?
I think it's accurate, but also making sure to include that, like being firm in what you believe and trying to teach other people why that is the way, teaching all of these liberals why, what Israel is doing is wrong and why the world needs a free Palestine, and being very firm in that, but they have to come at it in a way that's be nice. Otherwise people aren't going to listen to me. I have to, if you read Perfect Victims, I think a lot about that, like why I wear a button down more often. It's because like he talks a lot in that book, he talks a lot about how Palestinians are only seen as terrorists or victims. Yeah. And in order to have any sort of credibility in the public sphere, you have to first be defanged. And I admittedly play into it, and it doesn't feel great, but if I feel like I'm going to be taken more seriously, if I present in a certain way, this, scholarly guy, and I wear a button down and a pair of slacks and not a keffiyeh, if that's going to be the most effective way to create material change and actually help get freedom from my friends, then I'll take a little hit to my own personal pride. But read Perfect Victims. It's a great book.
Yeah, it's actually going to be next on my reading list. I read a lot about message strategy, and when you started to say that is a key portion of that book, that jumped it up above a few others that I have in my queue.
Yeah, well, for him, it's more of like, I'm really mad that this is the thing, right? Like, and he's not a Palestinian American, but he grew up with occupation, right? So he doesn't have the privilege I have of it being something that,
No, I just want to thank you for your time. And one of the things I'm taking away personally from this interview is you brought up a lot of things, especially with Sudan and with the Congo, where I only have a very surface level understanding. And one of the messages I'm taking from you, and I hope that you'll affirm, is that for us to actually stand on what we believe in, we have to know what we believe in and self-educate.
Totally.
So that's going to be my takeaway lesson for the audience today. Last thing that I forgot to ask you, or something you want to say on the way out, the floor is yours. And then where can people find you if you want them to find you on social media or other places?
Watch Democracy Now. Get the app. That's my favorite news source. If you want to understand what's going on in Palestine, if you want what I think is fair coverage of Palestine, Democracy Now is my favorite media. They have an app. They do a 1 hour news show every morning, and yeah, I think that if you watch Democracy Now every day and you agree with it, you'll know what's going on in the world fairly well. They do the highlights in like the first 15 minutes, and then they do in depth on a few things. But you can find me on Instagram. I'm Roland, my name 3 times. And then on my organizations were Orediggers Against Apartheid with underscore, so Orediggers _against _apartheid. And then I actually always forget if we're SDS _ minds or minds _ SDS, but one of those 2 on Instagram. Those are my organizations. I think I'm going to start a new thing, and I didn't even say this. I'm going to start a project called No Apartheid Voter Pledge, where I make people sign a pledge to not vote for any candidates who support apartheid. But that's a whole other thing. So that'll be an Instagram page soon, I think. But
Cool.
I haven't done that
Why don't
yet.
you set that up and at least just the name and the page, and I'll point people to that in the interview too.
All right, cool.
Hey,
Yeah.
it was a
And
pleasure
our
getting to know you.
nonprofit's TreeWater.
Yeah, nonprofits TreeWater, and that's also on Instagram,
TreeWater.
right?
Yeah.
All of those links will be in the description. Thank you so much for your time today, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Everybody else out there, go check these nonprofits out, and let's all educate ourselves and fight the good fight.
And if you're in Colorado, if you go to the rally Saturday, come find the Minds SDS table.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's tomorrow.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you so much.
Issa. Okay. Issa? Yes. Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway.
Issa Galloway, convert to Islam, defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, and a more sophisticated approach